Hello and welcome to week 3 of Hebrew syntax and exegesis. Over the summer, this is going to be topics 5 and 6 for this week. So we're moving right along here. This week we're going to look at chapters 30 and 31. So we'll get right to it. I'll highlight a couple things for you, give you an example, and then you guys can have at it. Chapter 30, we're going to be looking at the R1 Aleph special cases. Now, these are special cases because we're only going to be looking at a few of the verbs. Amar, Achal, Avad, Afa, Ava, and Achaz are the ones that we'll be looking at this in this chapter. And these are special cases because they kind of act differently than other R1 gutturals, even other R1 Aleph gutturals. So the place where they act differently is in the call imperfect, and I'll show you those in just a moment. A couple of these that I want to mention to you that we won't bother with much is afa and ava. The hey on the end of those two is actually what indicates that these two verbs were originally a final vav yod verb. Or an R3 Vav Yod, which we'll get to later in the semester. So these are actually doubly weak in that sense. So we won't deal with those much here, but we will see Amar, Achal, Avad, and then we'll also have Achaz, even though it sometimes is an R1 special case. As we get into these and you hear a lot of sometimes, you hear a lot of maybe, you hear a lot of this possibly would be this way, I want to reinforce for you again and just help you keep in mind that we are describing what Hebrew is doing. We're describing what we see in the Hebrew Bible. And so basically when we get to these R1 Aleph special cases, we basically have to have a chapter on these because we see this odd formation in the Hebrew Bible with these words particularly. So there's nothing special about them. There's nothing that well, how do I know that it's these, that this Aleph R1 acts this way and this one doesn't? It just, this is the nature of these words, and so the Hebrew Bible writes them this way, and so we have this chapter to describe them and to lay out kind of how they work. What we would call the weaknesses or the infirmities of these, you can probably, you might guess with a guttural it would be a dagesh or a schwa problem, but in fact, in this case, it's the performative vowel. We change from an A to an O, and again, it's just the way they work. It is a little bit bizarre, but it's just the way it happens. And then also we get the thematic vowel dissimilation. Because that A changes to an O, in strong verbs where we typically would have an O holum in the R2 thematic vowel, standard verbs. Hebrew doesn't like that O sound in the performative and the thematic, and so we get various dissimilations then in the thematic vowel, kind of as a consequence of the performative vowel changing. Again, not a great explanation for that with the performative vowel changing, but just know that it does. And the beauty is that I won't ever ask you to explain this. So here's the remedy, what he calls the remedy for the performative vowel. I won't ask you to explain this. So as it relates to writing these out or creating these verbs, if you look at the first one there, the 1CS, if you can know that that fifth step, ochol, is kind of a quasi-proto form where that holum is in the performative aleph. Notice in step 4, the R1 aleph actually drops out because we have two alephs in a row. It drops out. So the aleph we're left with in step 5 actually is the performative aleph. If you can just know that in a 1CS R1 aleph special case, you're going to get an aleph and a holum, and then the rest of the original root, then it doesn't matter to me if you can explain that. So take a look at this, kind of get a grasp for what's going on in each of these steps, but at the same time, know that I won't ask you to write out these steps when we're creating these. Likewise for number 2 there, all other forms, he's given you here a 3MS form, I believe. Yes, a 3MS form. Um, with a yod. This would also happen though with the second person forms with the tav performative that we see in the imperfect paradigm. But again, you in this case look at step 4 on number 2. You have the yod, the holum, and then the quiesced aleph stays this time. Um, it doesn't matter to me if you can explain steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you know that in an R1 Olive special case, the holum in the theme vowel is what we get, or sorry, take that back, the holum in the performative vowel is what we get, then I'm okay with that. So there's the remedy for that performative vowel. Basically, just know a 1CS is a holum with the aleph, and the other forms get a holum in the performative. Okay. As it relates to the remedy of the theme vowel, we're going to be looking at this chart here. And this, again, we are describing, not prescribing. So we just kind of have to make a chart that tells us generally what happens. I do believe it's either this one or the next. It's the next chart, so never mind. Dr. Fuller does say that there are a lot of exceptions to this, but in this case, I think these are pretty standard. You can see how he has divided it up here. On the left-hand side, we have non-pausal and pausal, and then on the upper edge, we have regular and vav consecutive. So the vav consecutive is gonna pull the accent to the performative, which is going to leave us with a closed unaccented syllable at the end of the word, and so you can see those behave a little bit differently. But if you can memorize this chart, know which word does which, takes which vowel in which place, this is going to help you with that dissimilation of theme vowels. So we've got a little bit of memorization here that you do need to get under your belt, but if you do, then these R1 Olive special cases won't be incredibly burdensome to you. Take the performative, put the holum on it, think of the chart here. What word am I dealing with? Am I in pause? Am I not? Do I have a vav consecutive? Do I not? And then, there's your theme vowel. You can find out which quadrant you need to use here. The smaller version of this chart is really just a simplified version. He explains that in the video, so I'll let you take a look at that. But you can see kind of how this chart works there. Let me make a comment here about this idea of pausal. The idea of being in pause for a word has more to do with like the bigger sentence structure. And so what I mean by that is the accent that he has put here, the athnach, to indicate that the word is, quote, in pause, is actually a heavy disjunctive accent. And so this would be the accent that was used to kind of divide the big parts of the sentence in the Hebrew Bible. And so being a heavy disjunctive accent, that word is kind of in pause. If you can think about these marks being cantillation marks, or how they would sing the text, they would really draw this word out in the sentence. So what I wanted you to know about the pausal idea is there's nothing really special about the word in itself that makes it pausal or non-pausal. It has to do with where it fits in the sentence structure. And so typically you're going to be looking at a pausal form in this with this hard, heavy disjunctive accent, something like an athnach or a zakef, something heavy like that. So wanted to mention that to you. That way you kind of know what pause is as a concept. But then you can just learn this chart if you want to kind of see how those theme vowels dissimilate. Dr. Fuller does mention in his video that this chart is very much like a stained glass window. He talks about having red and green sections. And this goes back to our discussion of the colors of the theme vowels. That if that does help you memorize these, here is another chart that a student made several years ago that kind of has the colors in them. I do have this chart as a PDF. If any of you would like it, please email me and I'd be glad to post it. But it also, this one, that's good about this one is it lists the actual definitions of those words and how they act in each quadrant rather than just the word itself. So if this can be helpful to you and a good way of pedagogically thinking about it, then let me know. I'll send that to you as well. But you can see the quote colors there as well. Let me work through a little example here for you. A call perfect 1CS of 1CS pausal. Now that I look at this, I think that it was supposed to be imperfect. Let me see what I wrote here. Yes, it is supposed to be imperfect. I apologize for that. It should be a call imperfect 1CS pausal. So what I have here is I have already I've gone on ahead and written out for you the second aleph. Now keep in mind I don't need you to show me this on your work. If you want to go ahead and skip to this step right here, I would be glad to see that. That is not a problem to me. But I wanted to just show you the fuller picture here. We're going to take that A in the theme in the preformative vowel. The silent schwa under the R1 aleph will quiesce. The preformative vowel becomes the holum, and the R1 aleph flees. And so we're left then with the form you see there, ochal. So next we need to decide the dissimilation of the theme vowel. It's not going to maintain that A in this case. And what we have is a 1CS pausal. So we are in pause. That's going to be the bottom two pieces, the bottom half of that chart. And then we don't have a vav consecutive. So we're going to be in the bottom left quadrant of that chart. And our theme vowel then is going to become a sere in that case. And if we are in pause, if he indicates that it's a pausal form, go ahead and throw that athnach on there for me. That way I know you know that we're looking at a pausal form. So there's a little example for you. I hope that's helpful. As far as Chapter 30 assignments go this week, go ahead and watch the video lectures, of course. I know that these videos that I'm doing are more of an introduction, but a lot of this may be helpful or more helpful if you watch Dr. Fuller's lectures first. So that might be a good order to do it. Or you could watch this one, watch his, and then come back, but I don't want to give you too much to watch there. Also, drill sheets 1 and 2, remember we're doing only the odd numbers, and then the Chapter 30 quiz from the workbook. Remember to grade those and mark the number you missed at the top. Also with Chapter 30, this is the 5th chapter between chapters 26 and 30. 25 and 30. So every 5th chapter we have this cumulative vocab quiz, and that should be posted for you. Go ahead and take that. If you would also please grade those. You may have to look around the book for where those words are. Quite honestly, if that's too cumbersome, just turn it in. If it's not graded, then of course I'll grade it for you. Be glad to do that. So but be sure and do that cumulative vocab quiz. Remember that the quizzes, let's see, nope, you guys don't have proctor forms. Take those quizzes with integrity, please. I'm trusting you to do so. As we move into Chapter 31, we're now going to shift our guttural to the R2. So we're going to look at R2 guttural verbs. These are not going to be just olives. We're going to be looking at all R2 gutturals. Here we find that the weaknesses of the R2 gutturals are the same weaknesses that we've had for gutturals all along. The Dagesh forte, gutturals will reject the Dagesh forte. We typically get some kind of compensatory lengthening in the preceding vowel. Resh will act like a guttural in this case. That should be an easy one to remember. Resh rejects, and so they get those two R's. And then we also have the vocal schwa problem. Gutturals, we remember, can't take a simple vocal schwa, so they're going to flip to a hadef. The beauty here, as opposed to the R1 gutturals, is that in the R2 gutturals, the hadef is almost always a hadef patach. So we're not going to need to think, what's our performative? Are we going to mirror that? Is it an aleph? Is it not? That kind of thing. Middle R2 gutturals, we're going to be looking at a hadef patach. That would be great. As it relates to the remedy for the Dagesh forte, you're going to use this chart. The gutturals are listed on the left vertically there, and then you have the stems that are affected listed at the top. I think in your book there's a bigger chart that has On the left-hand column, the call, and it just says strong, has the nifal on the right-hand column that says strong. Look, if it's strong, forget it. It functions just like we would normally expect. So let's learn what works a little differently, namely in this case the PL, PUAL, and HITH-PIL, and then we can let the rest just take care of itself. In this case, you're going to want to look at this chart and memorize this to know which gutturals will have an implicit dagesh and which gutturals will reject the dagesh altogether. And I think you can figure out how this chart points to that. Let's say, for instance, that you have a HITH-PIL verb with a het in the R2 position. The dagesh of the HITH-PIL boxes from chapter 22.6, that R2 dagesh forte, is going to be implicit. You won't see it, but you also will not get any kind of compensatory lengthening in the vowel preceding it. I just mentioned the compensatory lengthening, and I have this little note here. I'm not sure if you guys can see those. This is very small on my screen, but this is in the textbook. Just know that the rejection of the dagesh gets compensatory lengthening. The one that I think I wanted to highlight here for you is the third one there at the bottom. If you look at the pual, notice that kibbutz in the R1, once it becomes an R2 guttural in borech, you actually get the rejection, and then the compensatory lengthening goes to a holum. That may seem bizarre to us because we have a short U becoming a long O. But again, if you can start to think of Hebrew vowel classes as having three vowel classes, namely A, E, I, and O, U, then that'll help you out. That won't be that bizarre to you. And also keep in mind that we don't have a long U that is non-historic. Our only U long vowel is the shurik, and so we can't take a non-historic short vowel and make it a historic long vowel. We have to stay within the non-historics, going from a short kibbutz to a long holum. So remember, rejection gets compensatory lengthening. If it's an implied dagesh, it's going to behave like a closed, unaccented syllable. And again, I can't see these super well here, but he's given you, it looks like Nacham, and if you look at the chart there, the het every time in each of these stems is going to have an implied dagesh, and we don't get any kind of compensatory lengthening in the vowel preceding. And what this kind of tells us basically is that the dagesh is implied because it's almost as if there is a if the dagesh were there, we would loop it to divide the syllables, and we would say that that syllable is closed. Closed unaccented requires a short vowel. Therefore, the noon in each of these cases maintains the short vowel. We don't see the shva, or sorry, we don't see the dagesh in the het. It's implied. But we know it's implied because we don't get any kind of compensatory lengthening. So again, just trying to describe what Hebrew is doing, we have to say there is an implied dagesh there because the vowel didn't lengthen as we would expect in a pretonic open syllable. So a little bit of explanation for the implied dagesh there. When we get to the R2 gutturals with an R2 schwa, we've already mentioned this. The remedy for the infirmity here is to simply make it a composite schwa. Almost always going to be a hadif patach. And so you can see the example there, me anu. And I think actually I think I'm going to work that one here for you right now. Look at this. I did not mean to do that, but there you go. So if we started here with a PL perfect 3CP of Ma'an, it hurts my heart to put that dagesh in that aleph, if you can see it, but I tried to just show you what it would look like in a strong case. But if it hurts your heart as much as it hurts mine to see that dagesh in the aleph, then you know we've got a problem. We have a weak verb, and so what we have to do is look at our chart and find out what we are going to do with this one. In our chart, if you can remember that, the aleph will reject the dagesh in each of these cases. Once we reject that dagesh, we get the compensatory lengthening in the R1. With the compensatory lengthening, we do not have a silent schwa underneath the aleph, so don't try to quiesce that bad boy. If you remember with the vocalic ending of the 3CP, we reduce the theme vowel to a vocal schwa. So we actually here have me enu, sort of, if you me enu, got a little bit of a indistinct vowel underneath that aleph. But it's a vocal schwa, it's a simple vocal schwa, and our aleph also doesn't like that. So we're going to flip that bad boy to a chadif patach. So me'anu is what we get here. So this was a good example. It has both the dagesh problem and the vocal schwa problem. So there you go on those R2 gutturals. Assignments for chapter 31. Watch the video, of course. We've got drill sheets 1 and 2, do just the odds, and then the chapter 31 quiz. So a little bit of work to do this week. I hope this is helpful. Let me know what questions you have, and we'll see you next week.